with you again, Mark Newman, Chief Analyst at TM Forum. I'll be with you for the rest of the session today. Those of you with us yesterday, we covered a lot of ground, so I got a huge amount from the sessions yesterday. You never quite realize, I think, how much you've learned in the course today until you reflect on it afterwards, but I thought it was a terrific day. Maybe you spent yesterday evening reflecting on day one, thinking about day two, or laughing at the top European clubs who have now fallen out of the European League. So interesting to hear how for Madrid and Barcelona, it was they just don't have enough money. That's why they need the European Super League. So I found that most amusing, as I'm sure did you other football fans. So on to more important matters, which are the first theme of today, which is the open telco and automation. And I'm going to hand you over in a minute to Jeremy. But just to say that the first poll of today is up on your screen. So thanks for all of your contributions yesterday. So please, if you could just do that when you have a spare moment. I'm now going to hand over to Jeremy and Jeremy Cowan. Jeremy is editorial director and founder of Vanilla Plus. I think it was founded in 1994. So Jeremy founded it. It's on its 22nd year, which is remarkable given that Jeremy is only in his late 30s. So that was you achieved an awful lot in your teenage years, Jeremy. So well done. And Jeremy also publishes a couple of other magazines, IoT Now and Evolving Enterprise. Jeremy, over to you. I'll let you introduce the panelists in the session today.
Very kind, Mark. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to you. Yes, all of this was done while I was still in short trousers. My name is Jeremy Cowan, as Mark says, from vanillaplus.com, the portal for telecoms IT. And if you were here yesterday, well, welcome back for day two of a really fascinating session at FutureNet World. It's my absolute pleasure to be your moderator for today's keynote CXO panel debate. Before we get started, let me just say, if you have questions that you want to put to our panel, and we hope you do, you can start sending them to us right now. We'll answer as many as we can, and any we don't get to, we'll obviously pass to our panel afterwards. Meanwhile, just use the question window on your screen. And as Mark rightly points out, the poll is now live, so I hope that you'll take part in that. We really want to know your views. This is a two-way street. So let me start by introducing you to a truly top flight panel of speakers. In no particular order, they are Amol Phadke, who is Managing Director of Google Cloud and Head of Google's Global CSP Industry Solutions. Welcome, Amol.
Thank you, Jeremy. Glad to be here. Thank you.
It's great to have you. Next, let me introduce Ned Taleb, the CEO and founder of B-Yond. And we're proud to say B-Yond are the event's platinum sponsor. Thank you on both counts, Ned.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Next, I want to welcome Carlos Fernandez. He is VP Lead Partner Manager at Deutsche Telekom. Carlos is also alternate board director at NGMN, that's the Association for Next Generation Mobile Networks, and the project leader of ODIN, which stands for Operating Disaggregated Networks. Thanks for making time to be here, Carlos.
Thank you, Jeremy. My pleasure to be here. Bye.
It's great to have you. And we are also delighted to welcome Andrea Calvi, who is VP for the Innovation Standard and Product Portfolio at Telecom Italia. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Now, this keynote CXO panel is, as you're probably aware, on the open telco. We're asking, how do we harness the innovation required for networks of the future? Gentlemen, as time is tight and we want to allow some time for audience questions, if you can keep your comments to a maximum of 1 to 2 minutes, I'd be really grateful. Otherwise, I'll get my knuckles wrapped. So the first question is for Andrea Calvi of TIM. Andrea, how do you define disaggregation, first of all? Why is it so relevant? And what is the role of disaggregation in future telco networks?
Okay, First of all, we can define disaggregation touching a couple of aspects. First of all, we can talk about disaggregation from hardware to the software, and then we can discuss about disaggregation within the hardware, meaning the separation of the hardware into elementary network components. As an example, typical components can be the switching, the compute, the optical interfaces, and so on. So by, let's say, adopting this model of disaggregation software and hardware, we can sort of achieve a couple of interesting advantages. The first one is it's easy to understand that we go towards hardware commoditization. So we have highly specialized companies focusing on some hardware components, producing in very large scale, so having very specialized, very high tech, and this brings good efficiency in terms of volumes, especially because these kind of components now are becoming the same in the telco industry and in the data center industry. When you look at the second component, the software disaggregation, it means that we have companies now that can focus on software only. So they can get rid in some sense of the hardware as it has been commoditized. And this allows, let's say, small actors, startups, innovators to enter a market that it has been quite closed in the past. The two effects together bring a lot of competition, so the decrease of cost, economy of scale, and most important, you have new actors entering. We are lowering the barrier to accede this market, and what we expect is having a lot more innovation during the next year.
That makes perfect sense, Andrea. Carlos, I want to take that a stage further. What is the role of an operator as the journey to cloud native intensifies and the disaggregation solutions become more mature?
Jeremy, I would not say that that's a $1 million question, but that's super relevant for an operator. Grasping and defining what is the operating model and what will be the role of the operator itself and also the partners to that operator is in our heads almost on a daily basis. A disaggregated environment does require that the operator becomes more accountable for the solutions deployed. It simply cannot rely on one single party that delivers to you, a predefined kit that comes for, planning, building, deployment, and then even being optimized. You have many more partners and as Andrea mentioned, both on the hardware and on the software, players that you need to interact with. And what we are trying to assess via concrete examples, for example, on the mobile disaggregation by driving ORAN, is to learn from that experience to which extent that accountability within the operator has to be matched. What is then our role going forward? How much we want to retain those capabilities or interact with partners that can help us make that journey faster and still ensuring super quality of service for our customers. So this is an ongoing work assessment, and we hope from the exercises that we have been seeing in the live field to get enough insights to then shape the strategy much better.
Turning to you, Amol, how important do you think open networking is for the future of CSPs? I mean, everything we've discussed so far and a lot of the background discussion just assumes that this takes it as a given. Is it truly as important as everyone is making out?
Jeremy, fantastic question. I think from my perspective, this is actually quite a fundamental shift in terms of how we are looking at transforming the business models for CSPs. And what I mean by that is, it really started with the disaggregation of hardware and software, Jeremy, that resulted in this whole open networking paradigm shift. And when the disaggregation happened, it's actually done three things for the CSP. Number one, it has unlocked tremendous enterprise value because the CSPs are really starting to look at a much greater choice, which automatically would give them a much better TCO advantage. The second thing, probably more important than the first one, is agility. By starting to take a little bit more control of the ecosystem of open networking, the CSP is actually able to really look at it and start driving some of the deployments in a much more agile and flexible way. And probably the third most important part is that the CSPs now have the opportunity to look at new revenue streams, because those are getting unlocked by them playing in a much richer value chain and moving on top of that sort of value stack. So that really gives them a sense of looking at future revenue potentials also through the open networking ecosystem, Jeremy. So those are the key points from my perspective.
It sounds like a win-win throughout the stack. Ned, do you think Open RAN is going to speed up the transition to interoperable networks?
Hi, Jeremy. Yes, absolutely. So what we're seeing from working with, dozens of carriers around the world, first, I think the cycles of innovation are speeding up. I want to start by telling you this, Jeremy, is I'm an optimist and I feel the industry is adapting very well. Part of it has been, for example, in the case of ORAN with new entrants like Rakuten and Dish, but also the hyperscalers where Amol belong. But the hyperscalers, I think, just like per our discussion yesterday on the roundtable, they are adding some pressure on the telcos. There are areas that the hyperscalers prefer to work through the telcos, but if the telcos don't speed up enough, the hyperscalers will go around them. So I think that the effort of disaggregation in general is one that is extremely relevant. Running the network as a platform for innovation is very key. Embracing a much bigger ecosystem of vendors and partners in innovation is very important, beyond just the RAN part. So it's overall, this move actually is accelerating innovation. And one thing we're seeing, of course, with disaggregation is it's bringing back the concept of resilient networks. I think there's more concerns, whether it's security, whether it's anomalies, whether it's interoperability with a variety of vendors. So, our vision, for example, is based on continuous testing and continuous validation, because, openness brings with it also some challenges.
Understood. I was hoping to go to some questions from the audience, but I don't have any in my comfort feed at the moment. So I'm just going to carry on for the moment until I see those. The question that I wanted to ask is also to you, Ned. This one is, it's really about AI, and there's so much discussion around whether AI is actually there and in deployment and feeding into automation now. What role should artificial intelligence and automation play in the open radio access network?
Sure. So first, I know there's a lot of hype today about AI. We've been talking about it for 4 years, but now it's, of course, everybody's talking AI. But we look at AI as another tool or enabler of automation. So it's along the same journey. Now, one thing we find with AI ML is, first is access to data is very important. So that's why I believe, still back to innovation, the best model is one of partnership between the telcos and nimble vendors. I say that because I've seen the telcos over 20 years go from one extreme to another. There was the extreme of outsourcing their entire network to OEMs for managed services. I've seen other extremes back in the old days where operators even invented their own databases. So I've seen those. I think the current model is one that is working very, very well. So back to AI ML. So it's about the access to data. It's about domain knowledge to create models. And I think people that work with multiple carriers are in a specifically good position because they can optimize the models much faster. But AI ML for me and automation in general is not about automating current tasks. So a lot of people are writing about the jobs and whatever. For me, it's about enabling a business model that is not possible otherwise. It's about what you can do that you cannot do even if you add more people. For example, in the area of testing and validation, it's not about replacing the work of testers, but it is actually about enhancing testing capacity, which is very important with ORAN and disaggregation in general. That's where AI and ML holds a fantastic potential.
Amol, I'd love to come to you, if I could, to ask the same sort of question. I want to understand what you believe the role of artificial intelligence and automation is going to be in the ORAN.
Jeremy, this is a subject near and dear to our hearts at Google Cloud.
Thought it might be.
I think for us, certainly as we start looking at ORAN, it presents a couple of opportunities. Opportunity one is really about disaggregation, as Ned mentioned, of the radio layer itself. And that disaggregation essentially means that it's much faster and much more agile from an efficiency perspective to deploy standard purpose hardware or edge compute, as we say in cloud terminology, at a much larger footprint to enable radio access. The second use case for that is really in the private networks scenario, where you want to really start to offer radio technologies as a way for you to have connected industries as a whole. Now, when you do that, and we certainly at Google Cloud are big believers that as we start to do that, it will open up a lot of analytics opportunities, both in the private network space, but also at the edge of the network in the CSP space. And this is where our first party applications around AI ML have been optimized and tuned to take advantage of what the edge offers. And in a nutshell, what the edge offers is a lot more processing power, a lot closer to the end user, whether it's enterprise or consumers. And that can create a different inferencing models, different analytics AI capabilities via APIs that we can take advantage of. And then that way, ultimately, we are enhancing customer experience, Jeremy, whether it's a factory in the enterprise case, or whether it's consumers doing gaming or video in this sort of COVID situation we are in. And you can really drive that user analytics and customer experience using some of the techniques that I just described, Jeremy.
That's really helpful, Amol. Andrea, one of the questions a lot of people are asking is, how will open RANs and the current RANs coexist? What are the challenges, in your view, for automation?
Okay, yes, this is a good question. First of all, I need to say that there are no issue of interoperability from a functional point of view between a RAN and an ORAN. In order to make an example, let's talk about 4G RAN and 5G ORAN. They can both they can work together. They can interoperate through the standard 3GPP interface. So, as an example, you can provide dual connectivity by using the two layers at the same time. When it comes to management and automation, then we have to distinguish a bit the scenario. Let's make an example again. If we are running a standalone network with a mixed 4G RAN and 5G ORAN radio layer, then we will need to maintain the traditional management system. So the management system of the RAN, the 4G RAN, that normally comes from the same vendor as the radio access. And we will have not the possibility to make a full use of the ORAN opening of interfaces. This doesn't mean that we're not going to use AI or automation. It can be embedded in the, let's say, traditional management system. But again, we won't have the possibility to use the open interfaces of the ORAN in order to adopt third-party solutions. At the contrary, in a standalone ORAN 5G scenario, we will have the full possibility to open those interfaces, so to take automation solution best of breed from third party and so on. So the short answer is in the midterm, we'll have some, let's say, complication due to the coexistence of two different management and automation schemes. And year after year, with the progress of 5G ORAN standalone architecture, we will move towards a full open and automated architecture.
Thank you, Andrea. Carlos, do you have anything to add to that? How are open rounds and current rounds going to coexist?
Yeah, actually, before going to that point, Jeremy, I would like still to catch up, and because we are in a panel that is discussing innovation and how open networks can foster and even promote further innovation, I wanted to catch a bit what Emil and Ned said, particularly when it comes to AI machine learning utilization.
Sure.
So I see it actually being used both internally, so to use and optimize the way we deploy services from the operator point of view. For example, as Ned mentioned, to increase or augment our testing capability, being much faster doing the troubleshooting in case of a problem occurs. That's an area where we believe innovation, leveraging AI machine learning can be applied and should be applied, because again, as said before, and also by Andrea, multiple parties in this game increases the complexity. So we need those tools to ensure that that complexity can be overcome. And then on the outside, so as Amol was thinking in terms of ramping up on the value chain, ORAN, for example, brings the capability to use radio intelligence controllers, and not only that, but also then on top of those, the so-called X apps, by which we are opening up the capacity and to the entire developer ecosystem to come and build applications on top of that radio intelligence controller, being that for localization use cases, for scheduler optimization use cases, interference whatsoever, and therefore there is also an opportunity there for innovation in that space. So that's I believe it could be and it should be a way for us to grasp the innovation that open networks provide. To the point of the coexistence, I mean, bear in mind, we have been working for the past 20 years with very, monolithical tools developed for one specific technology. Sometimes we increase that and say we cover 2G, 3G, 4G with those tools, but people or persons are very much used to work with those established tools. And now we are giving them the opportunity to not only, embrace new challenges that open radio networks bring, but also be part of the development of such tools. Yeah, so they don't need to rely on the outside, but they can grasp, particularly when it comes to open source, the best things that are out there, and then customize it to their own needs. So it is a coexistence in terms of the technology side, but there is as well, a transition from a different operating model from SRAN to ORAN.
That's fair enough. Amol, can I come back to you on this? How do you think these changes are going to affect the vendor ecosystem? I mean, who, in your view, will be accountable for end-to-end network performance?
So Jeremy, first of all, I mean, this disaggregation and open networking has really shifted the way we look at the ecosystem. So we've gone from a small number of large players in a vendor ecosystem to a large number of smaller players, right? And so the reason for that, of course, is because of the disaggregation and the barrier to entry becoming much lower. We are getting a lot of smaller innovative players coming in and providing solutions in the open networking domain. Now, that actually drives innovation much faster, as Carlos and Andrea and Ned said. And it also helps to adopt standards much quicker, because a number of smaller players are incentivized really to try and drive adoptions much quicker. So having said all of this much bigger universe of ecosystem partners does shift the burden of creating a coherent solution, and to your point, having an end-to-end solution back into the control of the CSP. And this is where, at Google Cloud, for instance, we are working really hard to try and build an ecosystem of pre-integrated solutions on top of our Anthos-led open platforms, so that the CSPs can stitch that end-to-end solutions based on 100+ partners that are already pre-integrated on an Anthos-type open platform. Because otherwise, the challenge does exist that you have to now create an integrated solution from this much larger universe of ecosystem partners. The second challenge, Jeremy, to your question, is really around the culture and the way you operate this bigger ecosystem. Because now you really have to adopt and absorb concepts like CI/CD and concepts like SRE, which we at Google Cloud pioneered. And again, that's where we are trying to help our CSP partners to look at these new ways of operating while creating this notion of having an end-to-end service which the CSP would still own, including the performance, but giving them the tools and the techniques and the operating models, sort of what we did ourselves inside our own Google Cloud business, and give them those tools for them to sort of measure that end-to-end performance in a far better way in this bigger ecosystem of players. Okay.
Well, we are tight for time, so I've only got time for 2 more questions to you. Carlos, this one is for you. What, in your view, will be the role of system integrators in future network automation strategies? If you can confine your comments to about a minute, I might be able to go to somebody else as well. Thank you.
I'll do my best. I mean, I will use the shoulders of giants here, as Amol has mentioned before. So a system integrator that, first of all, understands that there is a technology shift that brings, the cloud native part, and that knowledge, that know-how has to be there. We also need someone that, of course, understands the service. So it's not only, the technology that needs to be understood, but also people that understand how to deliver services to the excellence that our customers are used to. And of course, that can be, on a high level discussion, so that we can use those capabilities in the best possible way, but still preserving and ensuring that we are able to differentiate our service from the other competitors that we have out there in the market. So a partner that has those capabilities is very much desired going forward as a CSP.
Brilliantly done, Carlos, which gives me just time to ask the same question of Ned. I'd really like to get your view from a different part of the ecosystem. What, in your view, briefly, will be the role of system integrators in future network automation strategies?
Sure. If you don't mind, Jeremy, I do want to answer the end-to-end network performance because it answers also the SI. I do think CSPs should be the one owning the end-to-end network performance, nobody else. Definitely not the OEMs. That's the difference between the old world and the new world. I still see a lot of carriers around the world that have one OEM. They outsource all their knowledge to them. And for example, when it comes to root cause analysis or detecting anomalies, in the new world, you cannot anymore point to the OEM. The carriers have to be 2 steps ahead of any OEM in detecting where the problems are. And this is where I feel the use of AI. So back to SIs, I do think there's going to be a new breed of SIs. For example, the SI's original model, which is to add hundreds of thousands of employees in cheap hubs offshore, I don't think this will cut it for the CSPs anymore. I think the CSPs are getting more aggressive in innovating, and I think that they want to retain more knowledge internally, and they want partners that can accelerate them in areas that make sense. I don't think anymore is going to be the role for neither the OEM doing managed services, nor very large SIs doing the whole gamma. That's my take.
Well, brilliantly done in a short space of time. There's just time for me to come to you, Andrea. The last question is this: what do you think are the OPEX and CAPEX benefits of adopting these new Open RAN models?
I think there are significant advantages, although combining and building a TCO is not an easy exercise. First of all, I spoke about the commoditization of hardware, which brings great expectation of lowering the TCO. The opening of interfaces also make us optimistic, thinking about the lowering of CAPEX. Let's think about radio-specific, antenna-specific technology vendor that can face and address directly the market. From the OPEX point of view, we're here talking about telco network cloudification. This means that we're year after year, step by step, moving all the workloads, all the intelligence of the network towards network data center. And this means that you have a great efficiency in terms of infrastructure, in terms of energy, in terms of processes for the management and the operation of the network. And this is an important ingredient in the lowering the cost of the network from the OPEX point of view. Also, we could mention also the software licenses as an example, because having new actors entering the market, having, as I mentioned, companies focusing on software only, can potentially bring different license market license model and different price market.
Understood. Well, look, Andrea, thank you for getting so much covered in such a short space of time. In fact, that goes for all of you gentlemen. You've been stellar at that. Sadly, that is all we have time for in this panel session. So let me individually thank you. Amal Fadka from Google Cloud. Amal, thank you.
Thank you.
Ned Taleb of B-Yond. Many thanks for your input, Ned, but also for B-Yond's support for the event.
Thank you, Jeremy. A great opportunity.
It's been good to have you. Plus, Carlos Fernandez of Deutsche Telekom. Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Really good to have you. And finally, Andrea Calvi from Telecom Italia.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Thank you, Andrea. And thank you too, ladies and gentlemen, for your input and for your support. It's time to hand over to our next speaker.